Hey fellas, it's Jaffe. Tonight we did Pot and Popcorn, and one of the movies, the second movie, was Zack Snyder's Army of the Dead. I wanted to give you a quick, review, impressions, what have you. There are some definitely really cool parts about this movie that I will talk about, that I'm excited to talk about and discuss. The most interesting part about this movie is how absolutely bizarre it is, in terms of it feels like it has multiple personality disorder. This is not dissimilar to what we talked about last week with Resident Evil Village, where the middle part, which is most of the game, is brilliant, but then it just becomes this totally other thing, and you're like, what is this, right? I don't know if horror, in trying to maybe go a little bit more mainstream, movie makers and creators in general in that space are trying to widen the net of the appeal of horror, and in that it's kind of a really rough and hard alchemy to get. I have no idea. But this is the second movie or second horror property within a month that I've seen that it feels like the tone is everywhere. That is the weirdest, most noticeable thing about this motion picture show, is that it swings just violently from being kind of like a movie like Armageddon. Remember Armageddon, which was like, it was silly, it was over the top, but there was still kind of a melodrama to it, where it was like grounded with, Ben Affleck and Liv Tyler, and Bruce Willis sacrifices himself and all that. There was still this kind of heightened sense that worked for also the silliness of that film. So Army of the Dead kind of feels like that sometimes, and then within the same scene, it starts to feel like Zombieland, almost like a cartoon Warner Brothers live action movie. And then it kind of does actual drama and angst. Like there's a scene where this woman has to shoot somebody towards the end of the film that she's close to, and she doesn't want to do it, but he's going to turn into a zombie. And it's the way it's shot, the way she performs it is not Armageddon melodrama. It is like something you would see. I'm not saying it's as good as Saving Private Ryan, but it feels like it's trying to be that grounded. Like she's like, can barely handle the fact she just shot this guy. She takes the gun, she throws it away. Suddenly we're actually watching something that's a real drama. And then there are parts of this movie where it's so schlocky, just in terms of what the characters are doing, or just the poor effects in certain places, that you're just left going, what is this movie? It is so disjointed. It is so, in being so disjointed, it becomes a bad movie. This is a bad movie. Does it have some things that are worth watching? Yeah, we'll talk about those in a minute. But the biggest guilt, in my opinion, this movie suffers from is it's not even that any of the individual lanes that they're driving in are bad, but pick one or pick maybe two. And, it almost feels like it wants to be the Rock movie, San Andreas, or even Rampage. The Rock movies tend to do a great job of kind of, marbling in some pathos and some character arcs and some emotional stuff, but it has the recipe right. It has the how much of this and that you put in, right? It seems like it's a dash of melodrama, it's a dash of, characters having a romance or something, but 90% of it is what you see on the movie poster. This is fucking weird, man. I mean, Zack Snyder is a really good filmmaker, and he's usually very consistent. Dawn of the Dead, which was his first zombie movie, still one of his best films in my opinion, was consistent the whole way through. 300 consistent. Say what you will about Sucker Punch, it was at least consistent. This really feels like a movie made by different people, or it feels like a movie made by whatever song was on the radio when they were filming. That was the tone they went with. So that's really bad. Dave Bautista's terrible in this movie, and I think it kind of cements, at least in my mind, unless he surprises the hell out of people, that this is not for him. I think he is great as Drax. He is funny. He is charismatic. He's obviously got the build for it. He's got the physicality for it. There's nothing about him as a human I don't like. There's nothing about him as an actor in terms of certain kinds of roles. I got no problem with it. I think he's fine. but he's not The Rock. He's not leading man material. And that's everything from the lack of charisma to his just incredibly embarrassing acting when he's trying to actually act. Like in this movie, Army of the Dead, that calls for him to be emotional, like sad and reflective, and he has a death scene, and it's just, and he has a scene where he turns into a zombie. It's just like, he can't do that. There is a place for him in this crazy world of action movies, but it's not being the next Rock. And also, I hate to say this, but you know what? A lot of, these people get paid for the way they look. Batista's not attractive enough to be a leading man, or at least not a traditional leading man. I mean, Mr. Bean is a fucking leading man. I get that, anyone can be a leading man if the movie wraps itself around them, if the character wraps itself around their strengths. But this is trying to make him like he's some sort of aspirational, guys want to be him, women and gay guys want to fuck him. Right? That's not, he's just not, he's a very average looking dude. And he doesn't seem like a star at all. So he's terrible in this motion picture. I wonder if this was written for him or if someone else was going to do it and they couldn't get him. I don't know. I don't know what in the world we're supposed to be compelled by in this movie. I really don't understand it. There's these guys and they go into the zombie wasteland that is Vegas. It's kind of like that movie Doomsday where the border around the city and all the, sick people were inside. And they're going to they're going to go down to the basement of a casino and get some money and get it out before the government decided to nuke Vegas and say, this is the way we're going to get rid of the zombies once and for all. They're all in Vegas. Let's nuke Vegas. And there's a father-daughter drama. There is a romance for Dave Bautista sort of that comes out of nowhere. There is a story about a woman going to help a mother who got lost inside Vegas and her kids are waiting for her. There's all these things that you would think are stakes that would invest you in the movie. And it's just like, it wasn't like Ocean's 11. Like, are they going to do it? Are they going to be able to pull off the heist? There was none of that. I mean, the shit for the most part they faced trying to get into the safe was the shit they were, facing for the most part throughout the rest of the movie, which is zombies are attacking. If you pull out the zombies, there's no heist. It's not even a heist movie. They happen to be going into a vault to steal money. They're doing a heist, but the movie is a straight up action film with a side of romance. It's really strange, this movie. The zombies are terrible. They're terrible in a couple of ways. The most obnoxious thing in the world is when extras are overacting. And this movie has a lot of extras. They play zombies. The zombie hordes, right? But they it's very hammy, and it's not intentionally. I can't imagine intentional. They'll get up on the casino tables. It's like something you'd see like at a birthday party. It's like, oh, we hired a zombie for my kid because my kid really likes zombie. It's very one-dimensional, over the top, very cardboard. So that's distracting. The head vampire, the head zombie feels more like a vampire king. He's like the alpha zombie, but he's wearing a cape and he's smart and he's got a romance with a queen zombie. And he's got this sort of internal angst because he has a child, and it's not that emotive, but the minute you start turning these people into characters, it's not as weird and scary, and B, if you're going to do that, you better make it into a compelling character. So you're like, okay, like Warm Bodies, where you're playing the teenage zombie who still has a crush on a living girl. At least it's something interesting. But this was just like, I'm angry, and I'm a zombie if you didn't know, because I look like a zombie. And that's the other thing. The zombies look terrible compared to Walking Dead, compared to even like, the Back for Blood trailer, which is from the guys who made Left 4 Dead's coming out. And, those zombies have like worms burrowing out of one eyeball and burrowing into the next one. They've got guys running around with their jaws just barely hanging on by sinew, and they kind of move and the jaw goes, and it's kind of hanging, These zombies almost feel like, remember that game Ravenloft, that RPG with the big blue face? I think it was a blue face on the cover, or like they almost feel like they've got these like ceremonial tattoo scarring running through their bodies. They feel like a mix of that and like the orcs from Lord of the Rings. And it's just like, these are not compelling monsters. They're just kind of they don't work. It's in a movie that's all about the fucking zombies, you would think. Speaking of zombies, the Zombie Kings. Well, okay, here's what I'll tell you. Let's go back to tone briefly. The Zombie King has realized, which is kind of a cool little thing, because he's the smart one. And I guess they're trying to build a civilization. I don't fucking, and they never really get to the reason, but I'm assuming the smart ones, it's almost like Planet of the Apes. What was the guy's name? The one in the remake who became the one, John Lithgow, whatever. The one who became the one that Andy Serkis played. There's kind of a zombie like that, and he gets the idea that, oh, if I wear like a metal helmet, they can't shoot me in the head, because he's starting to learn that that's how they kill zombies, is the humans shoot us in the head. And that would be fine, but the movie, he's wearing the helmet, all this is exposed, and his whole body, he's not wearing any armor or anything. So you'd think they could shoot him somewhere else, but it's literally almost like, here comes a zombie, and the people who are fighting him is just like, I'll shoot him in the head where the helmet is, right? It's not until the end, here's a spoiler, Dave Bautista does kill him, because Dave Bautista is like, oh, I'll shoot him in the jaw, and his whole head explodes. You're like, what the fuck is this? Now, this goes back to tone, right? If this movie had been like Zombieland, or if this movie had been just consistently silly, and you're like, look, don't worry, but I can even hear people now in the comments like, Jeffy, it's just a fun fucking zombie movie, man. What are you doing? Dude, I was fucking high as a kite watching this movie. I was in the right headspace for a fun, dumb fucking zombie movie. Okay, this was just dumb. It wasn't fun. It was, if the tone had been kind of silly and fun, the helmet thing would have been like, who cares? Let's have fun. But given the movie is ping-ponging back and forth between different ways it wants you to feel about it, and sometimes that way is, take this serious. This is a serious thing we're telling you. A guy running around with the helmet and everywhere else on his body is totally exposed, and he's just like, everyone's like, I'll shoot in the one place he has armor. It's just bizarre. It's just bizarre. 80% of the effects in this movie are fantastic. I'm going to talk about the good stuff in just a second. But 20% it's like student film. I mean, I made student films at USC. I was like, AC and stuff on like actual like graduate student films. And this is what they looked like. There's one sequence where they're going into a vault, and it's so dumb. There's these pressure plates that trigger booby traps. Like it's fucking Indiana Jones. So literally, big darts shoot out of the walls, like tranquilizer darts with feathers on them. And you're like, what? Is this some ancient Mayan temple? No, it's in the middle of basically Caesar's palace in the basement of Caesar. What? And then the next pressure plate, suddenly, like something out of the Batman 60s show, these, metal tubes, slide out of the walls, aka there's a bunch of PAs back there behind the wall pushing them out when Zack Snyder says, and action. And it looks so dumb and so cheap, There's a part where the Vampire King loses his lady love, her head's decapitated, he goes and he picks up the body and he's carrying it around. And again, it seems like it wants you to feel that this is angsty and emotional, and it doesn't work in that context or in that situation. But more importantly, it looks like he's carrying around a mannequin from like Macy's. It's like there's no weight to it. It's clearly, whether it's a CG thing or an actual mannequin, it's bizarre. There's no sense of heft. He's just like, it's dumb. Okay. Last two things real quick. The woman, Tig, it's not Navarro, but she's a comedian. I'm aware of her. She's funny. I like her. She's bad, and she's bad for two reasons. She's bad as a character. At first, she's likable. She's kind of fun. She's the, always got something wise ass to say kind of character you've seen a million times. And she gets a couple of good lines off at the beginning, and you're like, all right, that's cool. But that's all she is. And it's so cliche. And it's like, if you're Kate McKinnon, it almost feels like this role was written for Kate McKinnon for Saturday Night Live. If you're her, you go, okay, let's get her on the set. She'll ad-lib. She'll give us some really funny, weird stuff that we didn't expect. And she can kind of turn this character into something. But this comedian who's talented as a comedian, as a stand-up, is just kind of like playing. It's so cliche. It's so unappealing. And on top of it, I'm halfway through the movie, and one of the guys who's watching it with us is like, hey, did you know the guy actually, it was like Back to the Future. I don't know why I just want to focus. It was like Back to the Future with Eric Stoltz, where they shot some of it, but they had the actors responding to Eric Stoltz, but then they cut in Michael J. Fox, right? Well, I guess the actor who played the helicopter pilot that Tig ultimately played, I guess they fired him for like sexting with minors or something. And I think that's a good call. And they recast it, and they went and they reshot all of Tig's stuff against a green screen. My understanding is there were no other actors there except maybe like body doubles in the foreground shots just to kind of make them, blend better. But it's distractingly dumb once you know it. I think if I didn't know what they were doing, it wouldn't have bothered me. I don't know if that's true, but when you know what it is, you can't help but that performance is awkward. Finally, the last bad thing is just, I don't really know what the point of this movie was, right? It goes back to tone, right? It's like, it doesn't need to be a message movie. It doesn't need to have some grand point. But when your tone is so all over the place, it clearly presents, at least in, a quarter of it, like it has something to say, and there's this arc where Bautista becomes a dad, whatever. But there's also this stuff where, is it a statement on greed? It just doesn't, nothing pays off. Like the mom who goes into Vegas and the woman who goes to save her because her kids are looking for her. I think the mom dies, and the woman who goes, it's not like the woman, I don't think, unless I'm missing a scene, ends up with the kids and raising them. So she's just in the desert, and the kids are, I guess, back at the camp going, where the fuck did my mom go, right? There's one, at the very end, one of the most likable characters is the black guy. And I'm going to call him the black guy because he's playing the role, the kind of caricature trope, the black guy, and that, but he's good. He's charismatic. He's funny. And he makes it out alive. But then he really doesn't, because for some random reason, he turns into a zombie hours, even though everybody else turns into zombies almost immediately. He goes half a day more, and then suddenly he turns into a zombie. It's like, okay, and nothing pays off. Nothing is satisfying about the ending or where these stories wrap up. It's just like, why did I just watch this? Right now, here's what's great about this movie. There's some great things, because I'm wrapping this up, but listen. The opening is phenomenal. It is great. It sets a tone that the rest of the movie refuses to live up to consistently, not just in terms of quality, but even trying to be that kind of movie. The opening is tongue-in-cheek and really creative and really funny, and it's set to like one of the cliche tropey Elvis Vegas songs, and it takes us through the zombie apocalypse and how Vegas got overrun, and it's gory and funny and creative and surprising, and you settle in. I was just like, I remember, because I was high, and so everything's great, but I was like, this is the greatest movie in the world, and I remember it felt that way. The opening is phenomenal. The rest of the movie is just like, oh yeah, remember that opening? That was cool. Let's totally ignore it. I'd never seen this before. Maybe it's out there in zombie lore, but I'd never seen it. There's a part where, there's a big spoiler, one of the bad guys or one of the guys cuts off the head of the zombie queen. And you think at first he's doing it to kill her. Then he picks up the head like Medusa in Perseus, Clash of the Titans, or God of War. And as he starts putting it in a bag, like to keep it as a souvenir, it's still alive. I'm like, oh, right, because it's undead. It's, the head is still there. And so the head is moving and looking and screaming. And that was really, really cool. The CG gore, for the most part, was fantastic. Headshots, body shots. There's a scene where the Vampire King literally puts his hands into the uterus from the outside in of his dead wife, who's missing a head, and rips out the fetus that was inside of her, which was his unborn baby. And it has a shot of the baby, and the baby's really cool. There's the opening where one of the zombies knocks this soldier down, and then he takes his hand, they're real strong, and he takes his face, the military guy's face, and he just starts pulling. And you're like, usually you see like zombies go in for a bite, but he literally just rips the lower half of this guy's face off, and it's just so wonderfully gory and cool. There's a bunch of stuff like that, and it's really, really good. Back to tone. There's this one great shot with this zombie who gets in one of those booby traps that somehow exist in Vegas at the bank, and these massive doors slam And then when they open up, it's like, pulling, lifting a box of pizza, and the cheese sticks to the roof of the bottom of the top of the box. And you just see all of his sinew and guts and stuff just spread out, almost like a sort of like a X pattern across the door. Wonderful effect. Totally doesn't feel tonally like what just came before, but that's really cool. There's a safecracker who's really, I didn't think much of him in the trailers. He's kind of the guy who's more like screaming a lot and stuff, but he's genuinely compelling to watch. There's a woman, a blonde woman who I think is French. I don't know who she is, but she definitely, she pulls you in. I don't know if she's like, oh, she's got some big career ahead of her, but both of those characters and the black guy who plays black guy, all three of those characters, I think, out of the whole cast, really stand out and make you go, I'd watch more stuff. I would enjoy more stuff with these three people. It was just one point where there's this kind of sleazy guard at the refugee camp outside of Vegas, and they just play him like a total sleazeball. But in the end, when he dies, they sacrifice him to the zombies, and you can tell, here's what I think happened. They're playing it for laughs. And like, yeah, we don't like this guy. Ha ha ha. And then literally the zombies come out from hiding and, start dragging this guy off and about to devour him. And it's clear the movie is still playing that for laughs. But when you see that kind of a realistic thing with the realistic gore and stuff, they had to throw in a line because you didn't see a character say it. You just heard somebody off screen go something like, I forget the line, but the gist was, he's a scumbag, whatever. And then they cut away from the woman who was talking and just showing something else. And she's like, yeah, and he's a rapist. And it's almost like you can see like focus groups watch this and said, that's really mean that they killed that guy. Yeah, he was a scumbag, but they just these aren't heroes anymore. So it seems pretty clear to me that they had to sort of slug that line in at the very end because it wasn't working for anybody. So look, Dawn of the Dead, fucking great movie. Army of the Dead's just a terrible movie. If I was going to watch this, what I would tell you is watch the cutting off the head scene, watch the opening. It's brilliant. Speed through it for the CG gore. Have it running in the background if you really need to watch it. But I wouldn't waste your time watching the whole movie. I think it's like 2 hours long. It feels long. It doesn't feel like a slog, but it's like, man, this could have moved quicker. It's not a good movie. And I rarely am just like, don't watch this. But this will waste your time. Get the good stuff, zip through it, move on with your goddamn life. This movie overall is a 3 out of 10. Fun factor wise, when it works, it's an 8. It's got wonderful imagination. It's batshit crazy in parts. And when it's doing that, it's an 8 from a fun factor standpoint. But the overall product when you walk away is like, this is a fucking 3. This ain't very goddamn good. The last thing I'll say is, I love Netflix. I have a lot of people online that always give me shit about Netflix. And it's like, because we talk about Game Pass. We don't like subscriptions, Fine. I don't care. But ultimately, though, they're like, yeah, here's an example. Netflix is shit. I'm like, no, it's not. Right? So here's what I'll say. If you look at things like, Queen's Gambit, The Witcher, some of their great documentaries, some of their great TV series, I think Netflix is amazing. And they do put out some good movies that get Oscar nominations and stuff. But their commercial group of movies, their action stuff, their comedy stuff, maybe even their horror stuff to an extent, is just not good. Like they really, I hate to, I'm just peanut gallerying here. I don't know the person. Maybe they're brilliant in other ways and they should do something at the company. But whoever's running that division and making the calls on scripts and this is ready for a green light, this is ready to go into production, they need somebody else in that role, I think, because this is kind of consistent. This started with that Ryan Reynolds movie, 6 Underground. And then like recently, I think, didn't they have a Michael B. Jordan action movie and they had the Chris Hemsworth Extraction? Like all of their stuff, it almost feels like the Hallmark Channel for action movies, right? It's like, well, we checked the boxes. We got a big name, we got guns and explosions, but it's like nothing is high concept, nothing is compelling, nothing is before this movie, we watched Death Note, the anime series. I'd never seen it before, not the Netflix movie. And this thing that's pretty old at this point, immediately it's compelling. Immediately it's interesting. Immediately, because I'd never seen it, I'm like, this is really cool. None of Netflix's kind of actions or comedies have that sense of like, oh, that sounds really cool. I want to see it, for the most part. So I will acquiesce to the idea that, yeah, Netflix is shit when it comes to their sort of mainstream commercial movies. And I don't know what that's about. But overall, Army of the Dead was a real disappointment. I enjoyed watching it with the Gavin and Game folks, of course. That's always fun. But I think we were expecting, for the most part, something a lot more batshit and a great deal of fun. And this was not it. This was a real bummer. I didn't like it. Definitely watch the opening, though. The opening is some of the most fun stuff I've seen, in a movie in the last year. It's really, really good stuff. All right. I hope you're well. I will see you soon. Bye.